budgetary reserve, and by a 2/3 vote, I believe, of the board, transferring funds from the budgetary reserve into the general fund budget and appropriating those. Is that correct procedurally? And we've never done that to date. I hope we never have to. A couple of other comments that have been made. I don't view a 0.4% reduction as a cosmetic reduction. I think it smacks of pandering, perhaps, to some constituents. And there's certainly, I would love to see a no tax increase budget. I would love to see us be able to reduce taxes. I have voted for budgets with no tax increase, and were it fiscally responsible to do so, I would do so again. But I'm looking at next year. I'm looking at the year beyond, and I think it would be fiscally irresponsible to have a lower tax increase. The reason I support a 1.8% budget, Mr. Stoltz, is because that's what our administration is recommending to us. If they recommended to us a 2.1% increase and they had justification to back it up, I would support that. If they came back and requested a 4.5% increase and they could justify it, then I would support that as well. They have not asked for more. They have not tried to justify more. That's why I've not pushed for a higher amount. Our whole theme this year has been shared sacrifice. We certainly have seen sharing at all levels of sacrifice. We've seen sharing by our employees in foregoing raises. We've seen sharing of our students by not having some of the expenditures that they would normally have had. We've seen it in our community members by having to pay a little more in taxes. It is unfortunate that we have to raise taxes, and unlike what some people probably think in the community, I don't rub my hands in glee at every budget season and say, oh boy, I get to sock it to the taxpayers again. I don't like doing it. I've never liked doing it. But the constitutional mandate that we've been given, what the legislature has been given, is to provide a thorough and efficient system of public education. They have abdicated in that responsibility and passed it along to us. We are responsible for a thorough and efficient system of public education. I've put together all kinds of numbers in the past to show that it is both thorough and efficient. I had the opportunity to speak to one of our graduates from a year ago. She spent a year at college. And she said, you know, I always heard that people said that East Penn prepares you for college. I didn't know what they meant. But she said, I watched some of my fellow students struggling in classes that I had no problem with. And she said, then I got it. East Penn educationally gave her not only the tools as far as study habits, but also the training and some of the advanced instruction that enabled her to handle that college instruction well. And she said her fellow classmates that also came from high-performing high schools were in the same boat. And they did not struggle like some of their fellows did. That's what we talk about as a thorough education. When we look at 78% of our graduates going on to college, I think was the number. Was that, if I remember right?
That's about right. About 80% was
4
and 2 years.
All right, to go on to 2- and 4-year education. They're well prepared for that education. Our students, some of them still need to take remedial classes when they get to college. That's unfortunate. I don't think it's because of a lack of preparation from the school district. It perhaps is a question of their ability or application. I know that maybe people don't like hearing it, but not all children have the same abilities. I have some kids that math comes very easily to, and some who struggle with it. They might end up with the same grade, but my oldest girl has to work a lot harder to get that grade than my son does. When it comes to English or social studies, my daughter has an easier time with those subjects than my son. It's not a question of East Penn, but the abilities they bring and the amount they apply themselves. So I believe we have a thorough system of education. I've brought up on a number of occasions the amount we spend per student. We're 281st in the Commonwealth out of 501 school districts. That's the 2007-2008 numbers. That's the most recent the state had published. But we spend over, I think it was about 2% less per student on average than the average school district in Pennsylvania. That's efficient. And I suspect when I've been reading the newspaper accounts of the budgets that are being passed all around us, and the number of layoffs and the number of program cuts, that our standing is going to fall further as far as the per student expenditures. I think we'll be even further below the median once all these numbers are actually put in and made available by the state a few years down the road. And I think that the educational programs, in spite of what's being publicly said, are going to suffer greatly in districts like Allentown and Easton. They may talk about restructuring. I think they're going to have some shortcomings. I don't want to see that happen here, and I think a 1.8% budget is responsible, it's reasonable, and I would like to remind my fellow board members that 1 month ago when we adopted the proposed final budget, did I get the term right?
It's actually the preliminary budget.
The preliminary, okay, whatever it was, when we adopted that a month ago, Ms. Gannon, Ms. Hyde, and Mr. Policano, I believe, all expressed that they would be more comfortable, they would support a budget, I thought is what they said, with an under 2% increase. Now that the administration, with a little help from the legislature, has delivered it, now they want it lower. I think if you said you would be more comfortable with under 2%, you've got it at 1.8. Let's vote for it. Thank you.
Ms. Fuller.
I would just like to say that I share Mr. Policano, Ms. Gannon's, and Ms. Hyde's admiration for the administration's management of our budget. But I would like to echo what you have said, Mr. Ballin, in that we are in a changing educational landscape. The legislature is consistently changing the rules by which we live. So funding that we have today, we may not, probably will not have next year. The charter school reimbursement disappeared abruptly without any indication in advance that that would go away. Now there is vouchers being pushed in Harrisburg as we speak. And where is that money going to come from? Is it going to come directly from our budgets? I fear so. So if indeed we lived in a static landscape, I might consider supporting the 1 point. But I think at the moment the 1.8 is prudent. And my comment about being glad that my children have graduated when they did was simply a reflection on the changing educational landscape, because as Mr. Earnshaw has said, I really fear the general erosion of education. Our children are our most important resource, and somehow we are not seeing fit to invest in them. Not we here at this board, but we as a society.
Let's see, this is round 2. You've had number 2, so we have to go with round 3 for what we get back.
I just want to reiterate that about the budgetary reserve. I do not agree that the increase in budgetary reserve has any effect on the tax. It was funded not by increased taxes, but simply by an amount in the fund balance. So quite frankly, if the business office had simply left the budgetary reserve 5.4 million rather than increasing it to 5.7, we wouldn't have a 5% budgetary reserve, but there wouldn't be an increase, and perhaps it would have just, nothing would have changed, because nothing did change. All we've done is taken an additional $300,000 from the beginning fund balance and add it to the budgetary reserve. This has absolutely no effect on the tax increase. As for why don't we ask for more taxes, quite frankly, when I first heard the idea about the tax index being put into effect a number of years ago, my first reaction was, well, if they're going to try to put the screws to the school districts, just from a financial basis, not a tax basis or anything else, it would be well supported in saying, well, then we're gonna do the absolute maximum increase every year. Politically, that was never gonna fly. However, even in years when we could have raised it to the index, and we had an amount under the index, and more often than not, our tax increases have been under the index in the last 10 years. You could have made a financial case that to build up a reserve for harder times, for years when the index would be what they are today and perhaps next year, you could be justified in taking a higher increase than you really could, you needed to. So my position is I will vote for something I think that people can support. And if people can't support a 4% increase, then I certainly am not going to push for it. If the administration can whittle it down to where they're comfortable at 1.8, I can support that. I could support it at a higher amount if it could be justified. You do what you have to do. And I pay taxes, and I don't like the increase. I don't get any special dispensation as a board member. But like others, my children got a good education here, and I support the ongoing educational system, and hopefully the forces that would destroy public education can be thwarted, and public education can get a decent financial support from the state.
In round two, does anyone else who hasn't spoken yet want to say anything else? I will only make one comment. I was asked about why not raise it to 4.79%. Okay, there was a lot of advice at the beginning of Act 1 when it was enacted that said what you should do is find out the maximum you could raise your taxes to and raise it to that, and automatically to the index, and if you had exceptions, raise it above that too, because that would simplify your life. It'd be far less argumentative when you didn't have to worry about money if you just did that, because that was all you were going to get anyway, and if they wanted to pull this stuff out and take out the board's authority on that particular issue, then that's the way that should be handled. However, this is the East Penn board. This board has not been in the habit of using cheap political outs or taking cheap political shots to accomplish our mission. We're here to do a balancing act between all of our constituencies. We have to represent the students, the taxpayers, our employees, and the general public at large in their interest in public education, and balance all of those things. And I believe we've taken that responsibility seriously. So, as has been stated before, we have on many occasions gone below the index, gone below the numbers we could have gone to, because we tried to balance all of those interests. We were the first board in the state of Pennsylvania to offer an additional senior citizen tax rebate to our needy senior citizens, based on that balancing of responsibilities, trying to be socially and politically responsible at the same time to keeping our mandate going. So we don't just look at some number and raise it to that because we can. We take